And one of the things I love about astrology is that if I'm sitting at a dinner table, I undoubtedly, most of the time, know everyone's chart, right? Might be a little control issue, but anyway, it's true. And but because of that, I am not going to argue with the triple Taurian about how they want to run their finances because they've looked at, I'm going to genuinely see that person for who they are, who their resonant kind of archetypal energy is. There's no point in me trying to change them. But I might want to have a conversation with them and open their eyes to something, and they might be able to have something very profound to offer to me. But I'm very interested in how astrology can show how much we can actually give space to the other person and see the other person without a necessity to try and change them in order to feel better about ourselves.
Welcome to the Wisdom We Share podcast, where ancient truths and modern intelligence weave together to inspire, ground, and shape us for a wiser, awakened life. I'm Anjani Amrit.
And I'm Robin Wald. And together we bring you fascinating conversations from the worlds of spirituality, science, and human behavior, so you can connect to your own inner wisdom, joy, and clarity, elevating the way you actually live your life.
Dijana Dawe is the founder of Astrology. For more than 20 years, she's been reading the sky, and in doing so, helping people read themselves. She bridges the mystical and the practical, guiding thousands to understand their patterns and power. But today, we're not here for horoscopes. We're here for the human behind the chart. What astrology has taught her about freedom, fate, and being fully alive. Dijana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joining you both.
We are super excited to have you. So you say your real awakening came during your first Saturn return. So can you explain to those who don't know what Saturn return is? What was happening in your life at that moment? What cracked open? Because I also had that experience. So I'd love to hear.
Okay, so I don't know if anyone's ever heard, it's quite a common theory that there's a quote actually, show me the person at 7 and I'll show you the adult. And so Saturn, which is one of the outer planets, has a 28 to 29 year transit, basically meaning that's how long it takes to orbit the sun. And every 7 years, it makes an aspect to itself. So where it is in your natal chart will tell you very much about what you're here to do on some kind of dharma or karmic level, what it is you're here to learn, some of the struggles that you actually need to go through. Anyway, without getting into too much detail about that, the first Saturn return is when Saturn comes back to exactly where it was when you were born. And this usually happens around 28, 29. And it is often a crisis point or an awakening or a motivator where we question ourselves about, okay, who do we want to be when we really grow up? How do we transition from that youthful part of ourselves into the mature part of ourselves and actually take responsibility for ourselves into our future? Long story short, I'd actually had surgery. And I had been sitting on the couch feeling sorry for myself, saw this little advertisement that says, come and study astrology for 2 years. So I went along, and as the daughter of an engineer, I was quite skeptical, yet curious, and was that student in the class that kept asking the questions that the teacher certainly didn't want to answer. But ended up being the most committed of the students and actually just had such a revelation about what it could show me about myself. It's like the whole universe just exploded when I started to understand the archetypal symbology of, I guess, the various resonance that existed within me that I could then own or change or improve upon, but I think it's that aspect of owning who you are and not having to make excuses anymore that astrology gave me so much insight. So does that answer your question? That's like the first little bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually love the way that you languaged around that. You know, I'm also an astrologer, and we find our own way of breaking things down and explaining archetypes to our clients and to people who are new to astrology. And I just think it was really beautiful and on point how you just explained the Saturn cycle and what that means. And especially, I love that you said that learning astrology for you allowed you to both own and sort of be motivated around what you might want to change or improve. Because I
Mhm.
think one misconception people have about astrology is that that somehow it's fated and it's not changeable, and people don't want to know or don't believe in it as if it's some kind of religion because it's going to tell me something that I can't change about my life. And that's the farthest from the truth. So I'm wondering if you could speak to how you use astrology to actually help people be more conscious and have more free will in their lives.
It's such a great question, Robin, because I have struggled with that whole kind of concept of fate and free will for quite some time, and particularly earlier on. I think I did maybe fall into that early trap of going, oh my goodness, there are certain, bad aspects or good aspects, or these bad aspects I can't change, which is absolutely not true. And over the years, what I've started to realize is that the astrological archetypes have a huge spectrum from which they actually show themselves, right? And it is all about what level of consciousness that we can actually bring to these archetypes that then determine the fact that we absolutely have free will. There may be some element of fate in regards to, I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so I believe that we've chosen the chart that we have for a reason. And what that reason is, that's a whole nother subject, but we've chosen the chart that we have for a reason, but how we play that tune, how we learn to actually resonate with those archetypes is very much up to our free will. And of course, our cultural and societal and parental and environmental conditions obviously play a huge part. So when I'm working with a client, I do need to consider all of those things, but I really like to help a client meet them where they are. And that is obviously through questions. So I'm definitely not one of those astrologers who is going to sit there and just tell you everything about yourself. I want to have a conversation. I want to gauge where you are at so that we can then talk about how those archetypes can help illuminate something about yourself that you can work with, where those challenges might be and how you can integrate those challenges perhaps in order to grow and be your best self. And that's what I absolutely love about it.
So, Diana, when you talk about, you just spoke about evolutionary astrology and astrological archetypes. Could you hear me then when I said that? Or
No, I was going to pause you. You were garbled and we couldn't really hear you. So
they've just
I
decided,
could hear her fine.
they've just decided to drill right outside my window. So, Diana, you mentioned two things there: evolutionary astrology and astrological archetypes. Can you break those down briefly for people who don't know what you mean?
So, evolutionary astrology is really based on the theory that, okay, we have a chart and it is a blueprint of where the planets were and what signs they were in at the exact time and place of your birth. And that's great. That can tell you a whole heap about your personality, a whole heap about yourself. But evolutionary astrology asks the question behind the chart, which is, why do you have the chart that you have? So if we base, so I very much liked, and why I came to evolutionary astrology is because I like to believe, I do believe, that we are a resonance of energy. We are a soul who then incarnates into this physical form, and that the astrology chart is a representation of some of what we've brought in from the past, some of the resonance of our, I do use the word past life energy, but it can also be cellular memory, it can be ancestral history, it can be energetic, resonance, whatever and however you want to call it. The evolutionary astrology is, okay, so why have you got the chart that you have got? So what is it that you're supposed to evolve towards in this lifetime? What is it that you might be able to, what have you brought in with you that might actually be a wounding or an energetic principle that you need to work through in this lifetime and release, and what it is that you need to work towards. Does that
So could it be what is that you're here to learn, grow, and evolve?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Astrological archetypes. Can you explain?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Jung was the first person who really coined this phrase of archetypes, which I've often been asked this question. It is like how do you describe but archetypes? All right, I'll use this example. When I say the archetype or the energy of the mother principle, everyone I think understands what that means. It doesn't even mean that you have to be female, but the mother archetype is a typical resonance in some way of how this energy expresses itself in a nurturing way. So the archetypes are like energetic principles, but they're like story and themes, if that makes sense. So, perfect example, as a Sagittarian, as some of us here are. The archetype of the Sagittarian is the seeker, is the philosopher. Even that, the archetype of the philosopher, the person always questioning, always seeking meaning, that's the archetype. And so we give kind of archetypal meanings to not only the signs, but also all the planets. And together they start to weave an archetypal story. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing it's the role that we're playing.
It's various roles. So we might have one or two, or we might have even more different archetypes that, I'll put it like this. When you go to a party and you instantly know the people in the room that you're going to resonate with, and you just find yourself attracted to those people and you hang out with those people. And then there's just some people that really, you don't even know why, but they just, I don't know, they just don't resonate with you. In your own chart, we might have equally those sorts of archetypes, energies that we really can integrate and work with within ourselves. So kind of like these little sub-personalities, I like to call them sometimes. And then there might be those archetypes that are really kind of contradictory to the what we actually consider ourselves to be. And we might suppress those, or we might project those out onto others, or we might not own them, or they might not come to us until we're much older, but they're still a part of us. And so that archetypal energy somehow needs to be integrated and absorbed. And I'm not saying, honestly, we're always working it out all the time. It's not like you just get this right in one chart reading and, you're done. It's as I'm sure you'll agree, Robin, a constantly evolving process to work through your archetypes. And as you age, the archetypes and the resonance of your sub-personalities, for want of a better word, take on different meanings, just depending on where you're at.
Yeah. I find that when someone comes for a first reading, their overwhelming response to that reading is appreciation for feeling so seen.
Yeah.
And for having new language to explain their own experience of self is
Yes.
very, very validating. And they find the chart like, oh, wow, this just makes sense. This is how I've lived my experience, and this is how I understand myself, but nobody's ever shown it back to me in this way or through these archetypes or through this language. So I think it opens up a door. I mean, even a door is archetypal, right? If you think about a portal, right?
Yes.
There's a transition, there's an entryway into something new, into some new space that they didn't exist in before in their own self-awareness. And then once you can lead someone to that open door, then they can step through and decide, okay, well, what room do I want to explore next? And where
and who do I want to hang out with?
Yeah. So that it just, as a coach as well, like it opens up conversations for further exploration.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that analogy of the door. And, as soon as you said that, I'm imagining you're opening the door, and this is the way I think a lot of people do see it. You open the door and you meet all these characters, right? And they're all you. It's just a matter of, how you can choose to get along with them all, really.
Yeah. And that's the inner work, isn't it? That when we're on a conscious path, we're actively engaged in. And then if we're not on a conscious aware path, it engages us, and it can
Yes.
be quite bumpy. Life can feel quite chaotic, can't it? And I think it's important for people to understand that if this is the experience you're having, then this is part of your astrology, it's part of your archetypes coming to help you see perhaps what's in your shadow, see perhaps the parts of you that you haven't recognized, realized, loved, appreciated, and bring them into the whole.
Absolutely.
I have a question. Sorry, Robin. What's one thing that, because I find when I work with people, I learn so much about myself. It helps me with my own evolution. What's your experience around that? You're teaching someone, you're sharing some information. Do you have those moments where you go, I need to hear that?
Sometimes I think that what I do is probably one of the most selfish, self-absorbed kind of things that I can possibly do. Maybe I like to put it like I am helping people, and I genuinely believe I am helping people, but it is absolutely a two-way street. And I don't know about you, but I'm so great at, telling people things and then going, oh God, I really should take heed of what's just come out of my own mouth and do that for myself. And, everyone does represent their chart slightly differently, and you'll see someone embody something that you haven't seen before, and it gives you a whole new perspective that you can then integrate back to yourself. So it is absolutely a two-way street. And I love to do one-on-many work, but actually I much prefer one-on-one work. I much prefer just to be directly with that person, because that exchange, and I can't imagine life without it. I just can't. And to answer your question, I've gained so much from other people and learned so much more about myself by literally sitting down many times a week and having deeply profound conversations. It's an incredibly privileged place to be in, and I couldn't be happier.
If you're looking for a trusted, skillful expert to support your deeper work of self-exploration and evolution in your life, relationships, business, or spiritual growth, we invite you to reach out anytime.
This is the deeper work Robin and I love to do beyond the podcast. Impactful mentorship, coaching, spiritual guidance, astrology in a one-on-one setting. All the links are sitting right there for you in the show notes.
I was thinking the same exact word, that it's such a privilege.
It's
such a privilege, because what happens in a reading is someone is really letting you into their life and having a very open, honest, vulnerable, deep, real conversation. I mean, I don't know about you, Dijana. I always ask permission if there's something challenging I see in the chart. I always ask permission first. Is it okay if we speak about your family of origin and, this archetype, or this, you have a Pluto square moon in your chart with a Saturn opposing your Venus in your chart. And this could mean, in my experience astrologically, like this could mean, and I'll offer some things, but it is a conversation, and you invite this person in to teach you what this means to them in their lived experience. So I'm actually receiving like on the ground training every time I speak with someone when they're sharing about their life and what this has meant for them. And then what they're sharing with me is going to help the next person who comes along with something similar in their chart. And I'll remember. I don't know if you've had that experience. That you're
100%, 100%. And I don't know about you, Robin, also, but I tend to attract particular types of people too. And I can see that when I actually, because of my own chart, I'm attracting often the archetypes that exist on a more subconscious level in my own chart. And that's kind of really interesting as well. I've got a really, I know we're getting into sort of nitty-gritty detail. I've got a very heavy seventh house. And so that's been one of my biggest lessons in life. But seventh house is myself and the other, and, having that deep exchange with another person. So, yeah, there's lots of transformation that has come from that conversation with another person. And this is such a big point. Permission is so important. And I think I'm segueing a little bit, but I'm very passionate about ethical astrology and very passionate about being a consulting astrologer that has a very strong sense of ethics and understands how important and what a privilege it is to work with the person and how careful we need to be. We can do harm. People, there's no doubt some astrologers have done serious harm, and I've sat with quite a few people, as I'm sure you have, undoing some of the things that people have told people. Our job is to, I think, just ask the questions that the universe wants to ask that person at the time.
What should people look out for, Dijana? Because it's such an important point, and I see that in my industry as well. When you're mentoring, when you're coaching, when you're offering advice, it's so easy for people to fall into the trap of just trusting and completely trusting what they're being told and not own their own sovereignty. What should they look for then in an astrologer that will enable them to get the right reading and enable them to be stay in their sovereignty, stay in their power?
So first of all, I think on one hand, I am going to answer this question, but on one hand, we're in such an amazing time because astrology has had such a surge of popularity because of the internet. And that is wonderful. It's like it's become really in part of the collective consciousness now. On the flip side of that, we've got pop astrology on TikTok, on Instagram, telling people that, all Scorpios are this or all Leos are that. And I think that can be incredibly damaging. And people can find out a lot for themselves, by themselves, just on the internet. However, what they don't necessarily get is the way that a professional astrologer will weave, and that's the word, all of the stories together and kind of bring the contradictions together, bring where the kind of harmonious energy is. So we can just look at one thing, like we've got Mars and Leo in the fifth house and what that might mean. But it's how that operates in the context of the whole picture, which is really important. And only a living human being astrologer can actually do that when they're sitting across from you and having conversation. So you want an astrologer that has some kind of accreditation, I think. Look for where they've trained. I'm part of what's called the Organisation of Professional Astrologers, which is a body based out of the US, but I'm the satellite in Australia, meaning I'm very keen to help elevate the professionalism of astrology. And we go through, so to be qualified, we go through a very rigorous 4 or 5 years of being assessed by our peer groups, just like a psychologist would. So we have kind of peer group assessments, and we have people judging as to whether or not we can actually hold space for a person, we can listen, we can be empathetic, we can understand cultural differences, and we do no harm. So
accreditation, I hear, is really important.
yeah.
And I think that's a great way for people to have an understanding of what they're looking for and who they're going to be taking on if they're going to get an astrology reading. I think it's so important. And then just and Robin, obviously you've got questions, but just to tag on from what you said around humans, because obviously you're leading to AI, and that was my other question for you, was how do you see AI interplaying with now? Because I know so many people who are doing readings using AI. What's the benefits and what are the things to look out for? What are the traps?
So Yeah, wow. I think AI has its uses across everything, really, if it's used consciously and well. And AI is only as good as the as what you're asking it. And so you need to be very aware of what you want AI to be doing. What I know AI does not do, you cannot just go and enter your birth data and get a holistic reading from AI. You might be able to say, AI, tell me about what Mars square Saturn means in my chart, and it will give you a generic answer that might actually help you genuinely. AI, from an astrologer's perspective, I could possibly put into AI, oh, just give me some things to consider about XYZ transit. And it might just prompt some questions or something like that. And I might use it in that way, but I don't very often. I tend to just use my knowledge and my intuition and my understanding of the energy of that person for the information to drop in and for that reading to then be, again, a two-way street. So AI is still very one-dimensional, very AI can't pick up on the nuances. AI can't look you in the eye and go, oh, you didn't really respond. There's something behind your reaction to that answer, or there's something more there that
Too. You know, I put in, I'm studying Vedic astrology, and I've asked it to give me my chart, and it got it wrong. So
mm,
that.
I think it's the same problem with, astrology, professional astrology software is often, you could just put in a report. And I remember when I was first learning astrology, I reached out to an astrologer and I paid, and they just printed out a report and mailed it to me. And I was like, there's so
no,
much conflicting information in here that doesn't even make sense. It's telling me one thing about how I love and then another thing and another thing. And it wasn't integrated at all. It was very like cookbook.
yeah,
And I think that that's the problem with AI. It might get some of the archetypal meanings or the house meanings or the aspect meanings correct from a cookbook perspective.
yeah,
But it's like doing a tarot reading and just reading out of the book. Oh, well, you got the Empress, so that means you're going to be fertile and have a baby and be but it's not valid in that person's life and experience and what they're asking. So it needs I often talk about myself as a translator, that
yeah,
astrology is a language. It's an
yeah,
archetypal, cosmic, mathematical, geometric language. And my role is to help translate, but to make it make sense to you, the person who is coming for a reading for a certain purpose to receive certain, guidance or information or understanding. So yeah, that's where AI falls short
yeah,
for sure, but can be useful.
yes,
I was just teaching a course and I was like, oh, just create like an outline. I want to teach 4 classes. I want to start with elements and modes and the archetypes, and then I want to do planetary. And I was like, just give me a good outline for four
yeah.
sessions. And it gave me a great working outline to start with. And then I went in and modified and edited and put in what I wanted and took out what I didn't. And of
And I
course.
think that's so important. And we have to be, we have to keep that knowledge and we need to be able to integrate that knowledge with AI and know when something's not right and know exactly what we want to ask it because we've got all the information already. So where I think it's going to be tricky is, a generation from now. God, I hope people are going to be able to learn to be critical thinkers and understand things and learn things for themselves because then we're in a very tricky place, right?
I think so, because we will lack the wisdom, and the wisdom comes from our own human experience. It comes from living life. It comes from discerning ourselves. It comes from making those decisions for ourselves, not relying on technologies to do all that for us, not giving our power and sovereignty away to that.
Mm.
So how do you see us as humans? How can we future proof ourselves around that using your wisdom of astrology? How do you think we might or could future proof ourselves around that?
Huh. This is actually a question. Like, it's such a huge question, right? Like, that's such a huge question. But of course, it's something I'm thinking about all the time. I don't know about you, Robin, but I don't know, this year, 2025, and definitely into 2026 is a massive turning point. And astrologically, we've had more planetary changes in 1 year than we have had possibly ever. And so we are on this precipice with one foot in the old world and one foot in the new world, I like to see. It's like, when you're a kid and you would go into state and stand both feet across two different states. That is exactly where I think we actually are as humanity. And there are so many people who are wanting to cling onto the past, and they're dragging, let's make everything like it used to be. You know what I'm referring to. Let's go back to the old, because there's a genuine fear of what's to come. And when we look at what's called mundane astrology, which kind of looks at how humanity, or even the Earth's soul, is evolving, I like to look at Pluto, and Pluto is just moved into the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius is all about innovation. It's all about doing something different. It's also about community, but it's also about technology. And I know they sound kind of contradictory, and I won't go into too much detail about all of that. But as Pluto moves into Aquarius, I think humanity is going to really kind of possibly diverge into two archetypes of the Aquarian principle. One is we'll just totally embrace this AI technology and be absorbed by it, and go down that whole path where there is that risk that we do lose something. We lose that wisdom, that ability to be conscious of ourselves and our spirituality. And life becomes very easy on some level, but too easy. It's already become too easy in some ways, right? The flip side of that might be the other half that totally reject that and go back to living in kind of like a very self-sufficient, community-focused environment where we actually not necessarily reject technology, but don't embrace it in that same way, and have a lot more agency and live in a more communal kind of environment. Does that make sense? So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, because I don't know the answer to the question, but that's just the way I envisage this phase of what we're moving into. And I'm including a lot of the other outer planets that are moving into different signs in the next few years as well. That's how I see it. How about you, Robin?
I think that that's a really good perspective. I mean, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for the next, 19 years. So more will be revealed in this generation. A generation is 20 years, and that's how long Pluto's taking to move through this space of change and innovation and future evolution. Cultures, communities are going to shift and change. Power is going to shift and change. So we'll see. We're all along for the ride,
I love
I'm a little bit more. Yeah, go ahead.
what you're both saying about that. And I love that analogy of there can be two divergent sides, and as souls in living a duality of a material physical life, there's this tendency, isn't there, don't you think, to get polarized into these opposites. And perhaps what I'm hearing from you, Dijana, is that what might be wise is to navigate the middle ground and integrate both of these things into our lives, so we're getting more balance, more neutrality, perhaps more integration with these massive changes that are happening.
Yeah, I hope so. I'd love to think of the middle ground coming together. Don't see much evidence of it so far, but maybe we are exactly where we need to be right now for that future to evolve.
Yeah, well, I think it always starts and ends with itself. We have to take responsibility to do that for ourselves. And if we can do that for ourselves, then we're one of many that will also be doing that for ourselves as well. And I think having these kind of conversations are very important. And as we're talking about what's coming down the track, because I think a lot of people are feeling, even though we may not put language to it, but we're feeling things are changing. There's big changes rumbling down the pipe. What's your take on what's coming down the pipe?
If there's some topic you're curious about, or an issue that maybe you're struggling with and seeking some insight and guidance around, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us either through our social links or on our web pages and pop us your questions so we can discuss them and offer some wisdom on an upcoming episode of the podcast.
Look, I think really I think we're still in the very close future. I still think we're kind of doing this where, which way do we want to go? I think we're very much still in that phase. And I think until maybe into the end of next year when things do kind of embody themselves, because we've still got this, what we call retrograde back and forth energy this year happening quite a lot, which is we can't really contain anything or define anything so clearly. It is, like I said before, feet in two camps, right? I hope that we're going to go down the path of being able to see each other a lot more and come together from a heart center a lot more. But I've hoped that for a very long time. And I guess what always amazes me is that every day I have the best conversations with so many incredible people. And yet there's this whole other world, and I don't know if I've ever met any of these people. So I'm possibly just living in my own echo chamber. But I see people really suffering on a heart center because of what they're witnessing around them. I also see a lot of people detaching from the news or, yeah, kind of going much more insular. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not really huge on astrology as a real big predictive tool. It's archetypal energy and how we choose to navigate that. Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini and Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries. These are all things coming up. We're moving into a very fiery, airy phase, which doesn't have much space for compassion and heart. So am I a little bit
The
worried?
counterpoint I'll offer for that, and maybe this is where we find the hope, right?
Yeah.
Is that as all these are taking place, Jupiter, which is about our ideals and our soul visions and aspirations, is in Cancer, which is about compassion and nurturing and caretaking each other and our families and our communities. And even as we move a little farther, to middle of next year, Jupiter moves into Leo, and Leo is very brave and it's about leadership. And it's also about, a certain kind of boldness and courage to do the right thing. And it is heart centered. So I think that Jupiter, it might be our saving grace over these next years.
I hope so too.
I'm curious, in your own personal life, you mentioned you have children, you mentioned your husband earlier. What are you doing to stay grounded? What are you doing to have fun? What do you do to counterbalance, some of the stuff that is more challenging in the world?
Well, every morning I get up and I dance in water. So I literally am addicted to aqua aerobics, which for someone with, a Pisces ascendant, that's my thing. I love it. I sing in the water, I dance, with other people. It's great. I'm very, very social, almost too social. So I'm constantly having dinner parties and playing with friends and laughing and eating and drinking, and I'm a very fifth house person. So I'm very I love people, so I tend to spend as much possible time as I can. Not that I'm an extrovert and need that energy, but I just love to share joy. So that's kind of what I do for fun and play with my doggy.
And
That's kind of it.
great.
And just, oh, look, to keep grounded, interesting question. I'm not a particularly grounded person. I absolutely make sure I spend some time outside and go for walks. And I live in a beautiful place in Melbourne where we've got, I live on 2 acres and I've got gorgeous trees all around me. And it's very, very nurturing to have that earth right there. So I do try to interact with that as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, it's something we all need to in our modern world of technology is to ground ourselves, isn't it? What's one thing people always ask you in readings that kind of makes you laugh or have an inward giggle?
When am I going to meet the love of my life? Or will this relationship last? Or why isn't it working? Or, how can I get them to love me? Like the questions around relationships are huge, I find, for me. So, so that's one of the key reasons. One of the key questions, yeah.
And I'm feeling that's you talked about earlier about the people you attract. Is it around love, relationships, partnerships? Is that the kind of people you attract who are looking for that, or would you say more as a species? That's one of the most important things that is top of mind for everyone. I think I remember someone saying, I was asked to ask a question to the Dalai Lama, and I wanted to ask, I asked about my relationship. Do you think it's something that's more a human condition, or do you think it's more something that you particularly attract into your practice?
I think both. I think we're in a real relationship crisis at the moment for lots of reasons. And I think that because I've possibly spent so much time and energy navigating through my own relationship lessons, that I think that's where possibly my greatest wisdom now lies, and which is why I do attract people who want to have conversations about relationships. And the thing about relationships that I always tip it on their head is like, well, the question is, what are your relationships trying to teach you? What patterns keep reemerging? And what happens if we lift the lid of the bonnet and see what's actually under the engine and what might actually be driving you and why you're attracting the relationships that you're attracting and how you could possibly turn that around? What parts of yourself may you not actually be owning and projecting out? What parts of yourself do you need to kind of integrate a lot more in order to potentially not keep repeating the same patterns? That whole thing of, oh, we've met the same person just dressed in different clothes again and again and again until we do something different to break that cycle. So looking back at our relationships and the kind of archetypal energies that we keep attracting is often there in our own chart, bright as day, for us to integrate, because it's often the parts of ourselves that we are not conscious of. And it takes the mirror, it takes someone to come along and actually mirror that for us to then to own that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It's always an inside job, but I love
It's always an inside job. Yeah, I love that.
how you frame that as well. There's such wisdom, there's your wisdom shining brightly in the world.
Is there anything else that you would like to leave our listeners with?
I think we can really learn so much about ourselves from our relationships with others. And I think that we need to throw ourselves into relationships rather than what I see so many people doing these days, particularly in the digital world. Oh, I don't like that about them, so I'll just ghost them. No, I don't want to do that. That doesn't suit my perfect image of what I want my relationship to be like, so I'm not going to go there. And I think we need to. I think we need to sort of jump into relationships more than we ever have before, because otherwise the algorithm's just going to keep giving us what we want to hear, and we're not going to learn anything about ourselves. We're not going to have any conflict. And I think conflict's incredibly healthy in order to stop and question why we might be reacting a certain way. And it doesn't have to be an intimate relationship. I'm talking about friendships as well. And I'm talking about our relationships with our parents. And, these days everyone's canceling each other instead of actually getting into a conversation and holding respectful space for one another. So I think that's my big passion, is to actually be in relationship and understand what that really does mean. And if you can, find a great astrologer who can help illuminate that for you, you'll find that you'll learn so much more about yourself. And one of the things I love about astrology is that if I'm sitting at a dinner table, I undoubtedly, most of the time, know everyone's chart, right? Might be a little control issue, but anyway, it's true. And but because of that, I am not going to argue with the triple Taurian about how they want to run their finances, because they've looked at, I'm going to genuinely see that person for who they are, who their resonant kind of archetypal energy is. There's no point in me trying to change them. But I might want to have a conversation with them and open their eyes to something, and they might be able to have something very profound to offer to me. But I'm very interested in how astrology can show how much we can actually give space to the other person and see the other person without a necessity to try and change them in order to feel better about ourselves. No, stuff that. We feel good about ourselves and feel good about the other person being who they are.
I love this. This is such great wisdom, and it reminds me of something I quote frequently, which is from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, "Understanding is love's other name."
Yeah.
And I think astrology gives us the understanding of other people, that they are really uniquely different than we are in a lot of ways. And when we understand that, we don't have to fix or change or argue. We can just love them.
Mm-hmm.
Love them as they are, love ourselves as we are, love our children as they are, our parents, our partners, our colleagues.
Yeah.
We don't have to, we don't have to force anyone into the mold through which we are living or seeing the world.
Exactly. And I love teaching that. Really do.
Yeah, I think having a greater understanding of archetypes and people's designs, human design. I come from an Ayurvedic, so understanding people's types helps us in leaning into relationships as well. So, Dijana, you have a very rare way of making the cosmos feel so close, not as something above us, but really as something moving through us.
Oh, thank you.
What we're taking from this is that astrology at its heart is really, it's not about prediction, it's about participation.
Yeah.
Recognizing our patterns, choosing how we dance with them. And I want to say a big thank you for bringing the stars down to earth for us and reminding us it really isn't fixed. It's a conversation we're meant to keep having and evolving through that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
It's been lovely to meet you all.
Too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Wisdom We Share podcast. We hope today's episode sparked some new insight, imagination, and practical tools you can integrate into your daily life.
Continue this journey with us by subscribing, sharing, and dropping us a review. Until next time, stay wise.